In this video, we will be talking about the limits and continuity. So, before we proceed, class, let's first recall sa atong limits. Now, naata before sa atong limits, like we can do direct substitution or we can simplify the problem first. Diba? Or pwede po ta atong mogamit sa theorem nga the limit is unique. So, sa katong previous nato nga topics sa 051 ninyo o sa inyo or sa inyong 060, we have the first limit kung separate kang approach mo gikan. If 2, dapat sa next nga approach 2 ra gihapon. In other words, the limit of a function is unique. You cannot have 2 or more limits in one function. Okay? Now, kani siya, class, is the formal definition of our limits. We do not usually use this sa ato ang pagkuan. We use the algebraic method. Dili ingon ani. Okay? Now, before we proceed further, let's have first the definition of delta disks. So, this is a delta symbol, the lowercase. Now, suppose this disk is centered at AB, and it is defined to be an open disk at centered AB, and kani ang iyahang equation. So, we had this sa ato ang first na video, pero ang naa dito was sa atong domain. X squared plus y squared is less than or equal to 9. Now, unsay difference ato sa ato ang previous nga video and this? Ang ilahang inequality. This one sa atong disk is a strict inequality. Ang dito sa ato ang previous na video, we have the non-strict inequality kay 9 less than or equal to diha. Now, what do we mean by strict inequality, class? That means, kaning naa sa edge, dili appeal sa inyuhang solution set. Mura siya boundary ra na siya diha. Pero dili siya included sa inyong solution. Okay? So, now let's have the definition of the limit of two functions. Suppose na natay variable x, y sa inyong function. Actually, class, if this happens, there's not much difference compared dito sa first. We deal with them the same way. If you notice, similar ra siya og definition. Ang gipuli ra ganya diha is your, instead na f of x, gihimong f of xy. Okay, now before we proceed further, let's have these laws or the theorems on the limits. So, these theorems will help us para ang ato ang pag-solve ani, dili na ato ang by definition, but we will use this theorem para mas dali po siya pag-solve. Now, the first one is the constant law. So, you don't have to do this definition kung mag-solve. You can use the theorem. For example, you have limit of c, limit of c as your x and y goes to AB. If constant ning c, for example, sa constant we have 2, 5, negative 8, or any number, that is also your limit. Kung unsa tong constant. Next, we have the identity laws. Sa identity, class, we have the limit of x equals a and the limit of y equals b. Usa kanus aning identity mahitabo. For identity laws, you set one of the variables to 0. So, sa first ani, sa kanisya, class, sa first, we set y to 0 here. Mo nang x na lang ang nabilin. And dire, we set x to 0. Sa identity laws, we are told nga pwede nato na siya buhaton. Next, we have the sum law. Suppose ang limit sa inyong f of xy and g of xy is L and kani m. You can separate them. Pwede ni siya class mahimong limit of f of xy plus limit of g of xy. Okay? Pwede ninyo separate. Similar kang difference. And next, we have the constant multiple law. Si constant multiple law class, ang iyang pasabot ani whenever you see a constant or any number, pwede ra ninyo na siya i-multiply sa result aning inyong function dire-diretso. Okay? So, in some cases, pwede nato na siya ipagawas. From here, we can have the constant times the limit of f of xy as your xy goes to AB. Pwede ni siya. Okay? And ang limit ani is L, so that's why you will have C times L. Next, we have the product law. Sa product law, pwede ninyo i-separate si limits. Ipareha ninyo ani, pero ang naa sa tunga is multiplication. We can also have the quotient law. Ang naalang diri is inyo halanggi fraction. Pero similar ra gihapon, limit sa numerator divided by the limit of the denominator. Next, we have the power law. This is important. So, ang naa diri class, pwede ra nga naa kay limit of f of xy. You get the limit first before you apply the exponent. Or, pwede pod nga i-apply nimo ang exponent daan before nimo kaon si limit. However, naana siya disadvantage. Kaingon ana, since kung imuhang kuhaon daan ang product, gamiton nimo daan ang exponent before si limit, that would like mag-expand ang imuhang function, mas bigger siya, mas longer siya, that would complicate your problem. So, safer ka kung later na nimo i-apply si exponent. Next, we have the root law. Now, take note class na kaning root law nimo, similar ni siya sa power law. Ang naalang niya diri, instead of f of xy raised to 1/2, iyahang gihimo og square root. Instead nga, kani, over n, gihimo niyag nth root. So, what does it mean? Pwede ra nimo i-apply later ang imong radicals. You take the limit of your function first. Okay? Now, let's have this example. We will only solve letter A. You do letter B. Naapot sa inyong handouts ang solution ani. Now, suppose we have the limit of x squared minus 2xy plus 3y squared minus 4x plus 3y minus 6 as your x and y goes to 2, negative 1. Now, sa limit na to class, according sa ato ang theorems, we can use direct substitution. Nako si sulat. We have, diretso na ko ha, x nato is 2, so we have 2 squared minus 2 times 2, y nato is negative 1, plus 3 times negative 1 squared minus 4x, minus 4 times 2 plus 3 times negative 1 minus 6. Then we simplify. We have 4 plus 4 plus 3 minus 8 minus 3 minus 6. 4 and 4 is negative 8. Mas 0 na. 3, 3. So our result would be negative 6. So next, you can do direct substitution. If dili pwede, you can as factor out kung pwede. Okay? Now, what if we will show that the limit does not exist. Now, masayon rin siya lantawon class if we can draw. Okay? Now, take note nga ang ato ang number diri nga atong i-approach is 0, 0. So, natay xy and this is our point nga ato ang i-approach sa ato ang limit. Now, we can have multiple ways class on saon nato pag-abot sa atong point 0, 0. Pwede nga diri ka mugikan padulong diha as long as mahit ni si 0, 0. Pwede pod ka mugikan diri sa pika side or daghan ka diri ang multiple ways on how to get to 0. But the easiest one is approaching from the x-axis and approaching from the y-axis. Now, suppose we will approach from the x-axis class. That means, kung mag-x-axis ko, unsay maagian niya nga point sa y? This is 0. Now, let's do that. Sa product law nato sa identity law sa atong limits, we can set x or y to 0, di ba? So, you have xy. Instead nga, kaning duha, isa na lang mabilin since si y nato atong is 0. So, this would be x squared over x squared plus 0 squared. Take note class nga kaning nga time, wala pa tadag apply sa atong limits. Giset ra nato si y to 0. This is one of the approach. Okay? So, we have 0 na ni. Limit of xy as your x and y goes to 0. We'll be left here with x squared over x squared as your x goes to 0. Akong i-disregard disregard si y since wala na may y sa atong equation. We can divide that. This is equal to 1. Limit of a constant is the constant. Next, let's set x to 0. We have the limit of 0 squared over 0 squared plus y squared as your y goes to 0. You will have limit of 0 over y squared as your y goes to 0. This is 0. Now, since atong left sa x-axis nga approach and y-axis nga approach, we received two different answers. This means that the limit does not exist. Take note class nga sa ato ang na-discuss before, the limit only exists if unique ang iyahang values. In other words, kung 1 akong nakuha diri, dapat 1 pod akong makuha diri. Dili pwede nga different. Okay? So again, when you take the limit class and you want to show that it does not exist, get two values. It doesn't matter where as long as mo approach ka sa imuhang limit point. Okay? Which is the 0, 0. Now, let's have the continuous functions. Now, a function is said to be continuous first if si f of AB exists. Unsa ni siya class? Si number 1, it's just direct substitution. Si number 2, you apply the limit if it exists or not. Si number 3, dapat equal si number 1 and 2. Now, let's have this. Dire. So, dire lang tayo mag-solve. Suppose we have the function f of xy, which is equal to 3x plus 2y over x plus y plus 1 at point 5, negative 3. So, using number 1, we have f of 5, negative 3. 3 times 5 plus 2 times negative 3 over 3, okay, 5 plus negative 3 plus 1. This is 3 times 5 is 15. So you have 15 minus 6 over 2. 3 there. So 15 minus 6 is 9 over 3. This is equal to 3. Now, for number 2, let's take the limit ani niya. When we take the limit, we can simplify the function or we can use direct substitution. If we will use direct substitution class, since dili man siya ma-undefined, we will also have the same 3 or you can solve that on your own later. Direct substitution na siya. Now, take note nga si number 1 and number 2, by taking the limits, we have the same value which is 3. This means that since they are equal, our limit, the function f of xy is continuous. Okay? Now, before we end this, let's have this following theorems. The first one is the sum of continuous function is continuous. In other words, kung ang imong f and g are both continuous, if imo siyang i-add, the result will still be continuous. Next, ang product sa imong two continuous function is also continuous. And the third one, when we get the composition of continuous functions, you will also get a continuous function. Okay? So I think that would be all for this video.